Hello everyone. So let us start the next chapter, that is excretory products and the elimination. Now we know that all the metabolic reactions which are taking place in a body, in every cell of a body, will be releasing some toxic substance from our body, right? And this toxic substance, when gets accumulated in our body, they might, in a cell in a body, they might be responsible for carrying out different type of problems in a body, and hence they have to be removed out. They has to be removed out. Okay, so this removal of the toxic waste from the body is called as excretion. So what we can say, the process of removal of metabolic waste. The process of removal of we know that what is metabolic waste. Metabolic waste is that waste which is produced during the metabolic reaction. It's that waste which is produced during the metabolic reactions. So the process of removal of this metabolic waste is from the body is called as excretion. We know that. Okay, now this has to be excreted. Now the regulation of whatever the metabolic waste is there, it is basically present in a body fluid. It is present in the body fluid. It will be taken from the cells into the body fluid. Now this body fluid will be consisting the solutes and the water. Okay, so now this movement of solute and this waste has to be carried out by this excretory system. So this regulation of its solute and water, movements is done by osmosis. Okay, so what is osmosis? We know that it's a movement of the solvent from high concentration to low concentration. Right? And this osmosis, by the movement of osmosis only, the organism will be able to regulate the concentration of solute and water. They will be able to regulate the concentration of the solute and water. Now, how do they carry out this osmosis? How do they regulate this osmosis? On the basis of the regulation by osmosis, the organisms can be of two types. On the basis of the regulation of the osmosis, the organisms can be of two types. These are osmoconformers, and the second is osmoregulators. So these are osmoconformers and osmoregulators. So what are osmoconformers? So these are animals that do not actively control the osmotic concentration of their body fluid. So they are not able to control the body fluid, osmotic concentration of the body fluid by themselves actively. Okay, so these are animals that do not actively control the osmotic concentration of their body fluids. So we can say they actually change their osmolarity of body fluid. So according to the osmolarity of the surrounding, what will they do? They will change their own osmolarity. So they will change the osmolarity of their own body. So they will change osmolarity of their own body fluid according to the osmolarity of the surrounding medium. So they will be changing their own osmolarity according to the osmolarity of the surrounding medium, and hence they are called as osmoconformers. Examples: all the marine invertebrates are osmoconformers. Okay, while some freshwater invertebrates are also osmoconformers. Some of the freshwater invertebrates are also strictly osmoconformers. Like example, hagfish is a vertebrate So hagfish has to be, you may write it down. Hagfish is an exception. It's a type of vertebrate. But still it is basically osmoconformer. It's type of osmoconformer. Okay. Now, what is the main specific characteristic of this osmoconformers? So these osmoconformers show an excellent ability to tolerate a wide range of cellular osmotic environment. So because they will be able to conform themselves, they will be able to survive in the variety of the range of osmolarity concentration. They are basically having best ability to tolerate a wide range of cellular osmotic environments. So they can survive in different osmolarity concentration. Okay, next is osmoregulator. The name itself suggests. So these are the animals which can maintain an internal osmolarity, which can maintain an internal osmolarity at constant. Okay, so these are the animals which can maintain the internal osmolarity at constant. This internal osmolarity will be different from the surrounding medium. The internal osmolarity will be different from the surrounding medium in which they inhabit, in which they are present. Okay, so they are the one which can maintain the internal osmolarity, and this internal osmolarity will be different from the surrounding medium in which they are basically residing or inhabiting. Okay, now so what we can say, many of these aquatic invertebrates are strictly or limited osmoregulators. Strict osmoregulators are the organisms which has to carry out osmoregulation only. They will never be showing any type of flexibility or deviation from this constant osmolarity. So they will never be showing any type of deviation from the constant osmolarity. But there are some other also which may get deviated at some time, which are called as, we can say, limited osmoregulators. Okay, next is most vertebrates are osmoregulator. You have to note it down. Most of the vertebrates are strictly osmoregulator. You have to note it down. Whatever I am saying which is not written on this screen, you should note it down. Okay, so most of vertebrates are strictly osmoregulators. It means, what does it mean? It means that they maintain the composition of the body fluid. Within a narrow osmotic range. It means they will be not shifting, they will not be changing their osmolarity of their body fluid at a wide difference. They will not be changing the osmolarity of body fluid at a wide differences. Okay, so we can say they maintain the composition of body fluid within a narrow osmotic range. Now over here also we have got some exception, like the hagfish. Although hagfish is a type of vertebrate, but it is osmoconformer. It's an osmoconformer. So you should be noting down the hagfish has got exception. It is, although it's a type of vertebrate, but still it is showing osmoconformers. Okay, osmoconformation. And so how does it do? So osmoregulators have to spend energy. Why? Because osmoregulators must either eliminate the excess water. Okay, so if these organisms are present in hypotonic medium, what does it mean hypotonic? You have to note it down. Okay, so if organisms are present in hypotonic medium, so what does hypotonic mean? It's a type of medium where the concentration of solute is low. We know that. Okay, so what is hypotonic medium? So hypotonic medium is the concentration of solute is low compared to the other medium. So when they say, when these organisms are present in a hypotonic medium outside, so what will they do? They will continuously take water inside. Okay, but suppose if they are present in the hypertonic solution, so if they are present in the solution which has got higher concentration of salts compared to the body fluid, so under this condition what will they do? So under this condition, this organism will spend their energy. To move the water in or out. So we can say here in the case of hypertonic solution, what will they do? They will take the water inside. Okay, in the case of hypotonic medium, they will basically lose the water. Okay, in the hypotonic medium, so osmoregulators basically have to maintain the water level, or we can say the solute level. So if they are present in hypotonic, they will be losing out the water. If they are present in the hypertonic, they will be losing out the water. If they are present in the hypotonic, they will take the water. Okay, so we can say that this is carried out with the help of spending energy. So they require, this is something important. So osmoregulators have to spend energy, to move water in or out. So it may need to move the water inside, or it may need to move the water outside. So they have to spend energy to move the water in or out and maintain osmotic gradient. And so how it can be done? It can be done by manipulating or by changing the solute concentration in the body fluid. So they are able to change the concentration of the body fluid. Okay, so this is what we are seeing about the osmoregulator. Examples: most vertebrates are strictly osmoregulators. Okay, so this was about the types of animals depending on the how do they regulate the body fluid osmolarity. Okay, next is how different organisms will be carrying out this type of regulation. So first of all, let us see the regulation in freshwater environment. So the regulation, we can say water and solute regulation. What are they regulating? They are regulating the concentration of water and the solute. Okay, so we can say the water and solute regulation in the fresh water environment. So regulation, water and solute regulation in fresh water environment. So here, so let us see normally the osmolarity of fresh water. You know what osmolarity is, right? So osmolarity of the fresh water means the water which is present in pond, tank and river and all that. So osmolarity of fresh water is generally much less than 50 moles of solid per ml. Okay, so we can say it will be not very high, it will not be very high. Okay, so it's around 50. So osmolarity of fresh water is around 50 because it will not be having so much of the ions present in it, while the vertebrates which are basically present in the fresh water, these vertebrates which are present in fresh water are basically having a high range of osmolarity. The body fluid, that is the blood of the vertebrates will be having high osmolarity, that will be falling in the range of 200 to 300. So the freshwater osmolarity is 50, while the body fluid of the vertebrates will be having around 200 to 300 osmolarity. So we can say the body fluids of freshwater animals are generally hypertonic. So the body fluids will be having high osmolarity, and hence we can say it's a hypertonic. Okay, so under this condition, when the body fluid is hypertonic and the surrounding medium has got hypotonic nature, so what will happen? The body fluid is hypertonic and the surrounding medium is hypotonic. So under this condition, what will happen? The body will lose the salt outside. So we can say what will happen? The body can lose the salt outside. Okay, and what other thing can happen is because the outer medium is basically having high water, so we can say the water can get into the cells, the water can get into the body. So two types of problems can found during this condition. What first is the loss of body salt to outside, while the second is the entry of the excess of water. When it is happening, when the outer medium, that is the fresh water medium, has got low osmolarity, okay, while the body fluid has got high osmolarity, that is hypertonic in nature. Okay, now to compensate this, the body cannot tolerate lot of water within this fluid. Even it cannot basically survive when it loses out the salt so much, so it has to adapt. So there are different type of organisms which are adapted to this particular condition. So there are different type of organisms which are adapted for this particular type of conditions. So like what we can see, the protozoans, we know what are these protozoans. These are unicellular prokaryotes, these are unicellular eukaryotes. Okay, so example, amoeba, paramecium. So amoeba, paramecium, all these are the freshwater organism. They will be found in the freshwater particularly. So protozoans like amoeba and paramecium will be having a specific organelle, called as contractile vacuole. Write down. So these protozoans will be having a specific organelle called as contractile vacuole, which is responsible for pumping the water outside the cell. So which is responsible for pumping the water outside the cell. So what does it do? It is responsible for contracting. It will contract and relax. This is the phenomena of process by which it will lose out the excess of water present in that. Okay, so this is about the protozoan. Second, apart from this, other animals also has got some type of adaptation, like some animals which are found basically which has to prevent the water loss. So they will be having a specialized body cover. In the form of scales or adipose cover. So it will be having a specialized body cover in the form of scales, or like we have seen in some reptiles also. Okay, next, third one is there are some organisms which may basically prevent the water loss, by not drinking the water. So if they are not drinking the water, so what will happen? If they are not drinking the water, so they do not drink the water to reduce the need to expel excess of water. So if they are not drinking, they will not require to expel the more excess of water, right? Next one is they may basically pass out a very dilute urine. So if it's dilute urine, so these are different ways by it the organism can basically survive either in the hypertonic condition or hypertonic condition, we can say. So they will be passing out very dilute urine. It will be having high amount of water. When the urine is diluted, it means it will be having high concentration of water. Okay, and salt will be less, so salt will be reabsorbed. Okay, so the body will be making sure that the solute and the water concentration is regulated. Okay, so these are the things. Other last important is some of the organisms may write down the some of the organisms may have got some specific type of cells which are called as ionocytes or chloride cells. So write it down. What is ionocytes? Ionocytes or chloride cells are specific type of cells which can actively uptake the salts, like sodium and chlorine, okay, from the surrounding water. So some of this organism will be having specific cells, that is ionocytes, which can uptake the ions like sodium and chlorine from the surrounding, and hence they will be responsible for again maintaining the concentration of the body fluid. So normally the water has got around 1 millimolar of NaCl. You can write it down. The water has got around 1 millimolar of NaCl, and the plasma has got around 100 millimolar. Okay, so 100 millimolar of the concentration of the NaCl. So the plasma has got higher, that is 100 millimolar, while the water has got only 1 millimolar. So if it is required to if it wants to uptake these ions from outside, so it will be moving from low concentration to high concentration. So we can say this ionocytes are responsible for, you can write it down, the ionocytes are responsible for uptake of sodium and chlorine from surrounding, and this uptake will be active transport. This uptake of this ions will be active transport. It means it will require energy. You can write it down. It will require energy. So these ionocytes or the chloride cells are the cells which uptake the ions from surrounding by active transport. Okay, so that was about the solute and water regulation in fresh water. Next is water and solute regulation in marine environment. The water and solute regulation in marine environment. Okay, so what is it? So now the organisms which are found in marine environment, will be facing this opposite situation to the freshwater environment. They will be facing some opposite situation like the freshwater environment. So in the case of freshwater environment, the outer medium was having low amount of salts, but in this case the seawater usually have an osmolarity of around 10,000. So the seawater usually have the osmolarity of around 1,000 moles per ml, right? But in the case of human blood, if we say it's around only 300, so the human blood is having the osmolarity of around 300, while the seawater has got 1,000, and hence this is the reason we cannot drink the seawater. So why? Because if we drink the seawater will be hypertonic in nature, and it will be having high solute, and our body cells will be having less solute. So what will happen? The movement of water will take place outside the cell. Our body cell will be releasing out. It will be releasing out the water outside the body, due to which our cells will get shrinked and it will get dead. Okay, so it is not it's not advisable to drink the water, sea water particularly, if you are even feeling so thirsty. Okay, it should never be drunk. Next, so we have seen, so the osmoregulatory problems in the marine situation are just opposite to those in the freshwater environment. Okay, so whatever we were experiencing in the freshwater, it's just opposite to that. Okay, now the marine body fishes, the marine body fishes have the body fluids which is hypotonic to the seawater. It is hypotonic, as I told you, right? It will be having less concentration of the solute. Okay, and thereby what they do, they tend to lose water from the body through permeable surfaces. Now we know that there are specific surfaces which are basically exposed to the water. Okay, seawater, that are basically the membrane, gill membrane, anal membrane, oral membrane. So what will they do? These fishes which are present in marine region, sea particularly, will be losing the water from the body, through the different through the different permeable surfaces like the gill membranes, like the anal membranes and the oral membranes. Okay, now so it has to be compensated. They cannot lose the water so much. They cannot lose the water. It has to be regulated, right? So how does it does? So to compensate this water loss, the marine fishes will be drinking seawater. Now let us see how does they drink and how do they regulate. So to compensate this water loss from the body, these marine fishes will be drinking this seawater. But just drinking the seawater is not enough. Because of this drinking so high amount of seawater, what happens? The body will be basically gaining excess of salts. The body will start gaining the excess of salts. Okay, as I told you, so this seawater which is basically taken up by the fish will be basically responsible for excess of the salts in the body fluid, and now this has to be now removed. So now again we will be seeing the ionocytes. So these ionocytes are the cells which will be these are mainly present in the gill membrane. You can note it down. So in the case of marine fish, these ionocytes or these chloride cells are present on the gill membrane and they will be eliminating the excess amount of monovalent ions. Okay, so they will be removing out the excess amount of monovalent ions from the body fluid to the seawater. So what does it do? To compensate the water loss, what will they do? They drink so much of seawater, so they will get water and salts both. So out of this, due to this, what will happen? The salts will get excess in the body fluid. Now they have to be removed. So they are removed by a specific cells called as ionocyte cells, okay, or chloride cells. Where are they present? They are present in the gill membranes. So these ionocytes or chloride cells will be removing out this excess monovalent ions, particularly monovalent ions like chlorine and sodium. Okay, so this will be removed from the ionocytes, while the divalent ions like the calcium, okay, and magnesium, these are the ions which will be basically removed from the fecal matter. So these are the ionocytes are responsible for removal of the monovalent ions, while the fecal matter will be basically removing the divalent ions. You have to note it down. Okay, now just so we can say, so though basically in the case of the marine environment, they will be taking the seawater, and due to this the excess of the salts will be getting inside the body fluid, which will be removed out through the ionocytes or divalent ions. Okay, now most marine invertebrates will be showing such type of regulation. Ascidians and even hagfish are now isosmotic in nature. So they will be, some of the fishes will be showing the isotonic sort of concentration, so they will not have any differences. Okay, any doubt? So let us see next is what is the next? It's the regulation of water and solute in terrestrial environment. Now we know what is terrestrial environment. Okay, we know what is terrestrial environment. The terrestrial environment is that environment, or we can say the land region, right? So the organisms which are present on the land. Okay, so right now we are done with the fresh water and aquatic water, and the sea water, marine water. So both are basically water environment. That was the aquatic environment, right? But now it's about the terrestrial environment, that is on the land. So in the case of terrestrial environment, let us say example of humans. Okay, so humans are basically the one which can die, which has got lot of amount of water in our body. We have got lot of amount of body, right? So if we suppose if suppose out of the whole body water, if 20% of the body water is well lost, if even the 12%, not 20, sorry, even if 12% of the body water is lost in any form, it may be in the form of sweat, it may be in the form of what we can say urine, or it may be in the different forms. It may be used as a metabolic reactions as well. Okay, so if even the 12% of the body water is lost, so the person can die. Okay, so a person can die even if the 12% of the body water is lost, and hence to compensate this, the person should be drinking a lot of water and should be eating a lot of moist food. So the water which is basically absorbed by the body in the case of humans, so it is not only the water which we drink, it is also basically is also obtained from the food which we eat. So the food which we eat will be also containing a lot of water. Okay, so that should be the water which is removed out of the body has to be compensated by drinking enough water or by taking some moist foods. Okay, next, apart from this is how basically we will be compensating it. Apart from, there are some adaptation which are observed in some organism. In some animals we can see some specific type of adaptation, like the one which is found in the desert. So desert, as you know, these are the region where is so scarcity of water will be there, so the water will be so scarce over there. Okay, so the animals residing or the surviving in the desert has to make sure that they lose water so minimum, so they should be minimally losing the water so minimum. So example, let us see kangaroo rats. Okay, so they are adapted to minimize water loss. So how does this do? So kangaroo rats are the type of rats where basically they lose so little water. So kangaroo rats are the one which lose so little water that they can recover 90% of the lost water by using metabolic water. So they will be losing so less water, and the water will be recovered by the 90% of the total water. The 90% of the total water which they are using will be recovered by the loss of the by using the metabolic water. Now what is metabolic water? Metabolic water is the water derived from different cellular metabolic processes. So we know that you would have studied in respiration that during the process of respiration and during the many other biochemical reactions also, there will be the formation of H2O. This H2O which is formed during this biochemical reaction, or we can say metabolic reaction, is called as metabolic water. So now what does this kangaroo rat do? Kangaroo rat will be recovering the water loss. The kangaroo rat will be recovering this water loss at about 90% just by using this metabolic water. So it will be utilizing this metabolic water. You can write it down. Okay, I hope that's clear. Next is the camel. As you already know what are camels, they are the one adapted to survive in the very hot and deserty region. So this camel, when the water is not available, this camel do not produce urine. You can note it down. So when the water is not available, these camels will not be producing any type of urine, but it will store urea in tissue. So they will not be producing urine because the urine will be consisting of lot of water. So they will be storing this urea, which is the nitrogenous waste. Okay, the first nitrogenous waste which is formed inside the body is the urea, and it will be released in different forms. That is what we will see ahead. Okay, but right now the camels will not be forming the urine if the water is basically absent or scarce. Okay, so what will happen? They will be storing this nitrogen waste in the form of urea in the tissues. Okay, and the water will be basically obtained or used, which is basically metabolic water. So these camels will also be using the metabolic water. It will not form the urine. Okay, and when the water is available, what will they do? They will rehydrate themselves by drinking up to 80 liters of water in just 10 minutes. So camels, how do they basically regulate this water and solid concentration? First, they will be minimizing the removal of the water by the body, that is, they do not form urine. Instead of urine, they will form urea in the tissue. Second, they will be utilizing maximum amount of metabolic water, mainly dependent on the metabolic water, the water which is produced during the chemical reactions. And when the water is available, whenever the source of water is available, they will be rehydrating themselves by drinking up to 80 liters of water in just 10 minutes. Okay, so this is how they basically they are adapted. Now we know that there are two things basically, the excretion and egestion. So you should be always keep in mind that there's a lot of confusion. What is excretion and what is egestion? So egestion is the removal of undigested and unabsorbed food. Okay, what is egestion? Which is a part of the digestive system. We have already studied that. So egestion is the removal of undigested food in the form of defecation or in the form of fecal matter, right? But excretion is removal of metabolic waste from the body. Note it down. The excretion is removal of metabolic waste, while egestion is removal of undigested waste. Okay. Now In the case of excretion, it will be the urine which is also excreted. Apart from urine, even the carbon dioxide is also removed out of the body, and carbon dioxide also considered as a waste. It is also considered as an metabolic waste. So this removal of carbon dioxide is also considered as an excretion. Removal of carbon dioxide is also considered as an excretion. So you should be knowing it's not only the urine which is excreted in the form of excretion, right? But the carbon dioxide removal is also called as excretion. I hope things are clear. Okay, so now let us see different type of nitrogen waste. So we have already seen what is excretion is the removal of the metabolic waste, and these metabolic waste are mainly produced in the form of nitrogen. Okay, the nitrogen waste which are basically accumulated inside the body can cause different type of problems, and hence they have to be removed. Okay, so how this removal will be taking place, let us see. Okay, so it can be removed in different types. The first one is the ammonia and NH3. It is the first metabolic waste of protein metabolism. You have to note it down. Okay, it is the first metabolic waste of the protein whenever the proteins are getting digested or protein are getting converted into for other intermediates. So during this process they will be releasing this ammonia part, it's amino acid. We know that proteins are made up of amino acids, so they will be releasing this amino group, and this will be responsible for formation of ammonia. So how they are formation? So they are formed mainly in the liver by process of deamination. So deamination means removal of amino group. So where does it take place? It takes place mainly in the liver. Okay, so we can say it is the first metabolic waste which is basically produced during the protein metabolism. Where it is produced? It is produced in liver by the process of deamination. And this ammonia is highly toxic. It is so toxic. Okay, so it requires large amount of water for its excretion. It cannot be excreted directly outside the body. Okay, so it has to be excreted with help of lot of amount of water. So we got it. First one is ammonia. That is a type of nitrogen waste which is basically first metabolic waste and has to be removed with the help of lot of water. Next is urea. Urea is comparatively, it is white crystalline solid. It's a comparatively solid in nature, and it's white crystalline in nature, mainly formed in liver again. So this will be also taking place in liver, which will be formed by two substances, that is NH3, that is ammonia, and carbon dioxide. So the urea will be formed by the reaction between ammonia and the carbon dioxide. Compared to ammonia, this is less toxic. This is less toxic. Okay, and normal blood urea level is around 18 to 38 mg per 100 ml of blood. This is the normal urea. If it is high, it may be problematic. If it is low, it may also be responsible for some particular reason. Okay. Next, uric acid. Uric acid is also produced in liver. So note it down. All the three wastes which we have seen, ammonia, urea, and the uric acid, all these three are produced in the liver. Now it can be excreted out in the semi-solid or crystalline form. It can be excreted out in the form of semi-solid or in the crystalline form. So it may depend on the type of organism to organism. Now, this excretion of uric acid is in crystalline form is helpful in actually why sometimes it may basically release it in the semi-solid form or crystalline form. So when they release in the crystalline form, actually it's helping the organism to prevent the water loss. So example, you have seen the bird droppings. It's basically the fecal matter which is released by the blood consists of uric acid, and these are the one which are the part of the fecal waste. Okay, so the birds will be releasing this uric acid along with this fecal waste. Okay, next is there are some other nitrogen substances as well. Which are found in different organisms. Example, xanthines. Okay, now xanthines, what are xanthines? These are the metabolic waste of nucleotide metabolism. Write it down. So xanthines and guanines, actually both. Okay, so let us say xanthines. Xanthines are the metabolic waste of nucleotide. What is nucleotide? You know that phosphate, pentose sugar, and nitrogen bases, right? So xanthines is the metabolic waste of nucleotide metabolism. Okay, it is not about protein metabolism. Now where it is found, mainly found in the penguins and the spiders. Okay, next is guanines. Guanines is also a metabolic waste of nucleotide metabolism. Where it is found, spider and penguins, both are found mainly in the spiders and the penguins. Next is trimethylamine oxide. Trimethylamine oxide. Trimethylamine, it is mainly found in the marine bony fish. Trimethylamine oxide. Okay, next is ornithuric acid. Ornithuric acid, it is a specialized product. It is especially found in the birds. It is specially found in the birds, which is ornithuric acid. Next is hippuric acid. It is a specialized product in mammals particularly. They are mainly found in the mammals. It is produced from benzoic acid. Note it down. It is produced from the benzoic acid. Okay. It may not be even asked a lot of frequently. These questions are not asked, but you should know about this. Okay. And last one is creatinine. Creatinine is produced from the creatine phosphate, which is present in muscles. So creatine phosphate is the substances, salt is a type of salt which is found in muscles, and increased level of creatinine is indicative of kidney damage. You have to note it down. So when the creatinine level is high, it basically signals that the kidney is basically getting damaged. Kidney is getting damaged. Okay. So that is about the different types of nitrogen waste present in different type of animals. Okay, now on the basis of this nitrogen waste, in which form these nitrogen bases are basically released? On the basis of the form of removal of nitrogen waste. On the basis of the form of removal of nitrogen bases, the organisms or animals can be of three types. On the basis of what type of nitrogen bases they will be releasing out, the organisms or the animals can be of three types. That is, first is ammonotelic. The name itself suggests. So here the excreted product will be mainly ammonia. So ammonotelic, what is ammonotelic? The type of animals where the excretion is basically mainly ammonia. The excretion is mainly ammonia. As we have seen, when the ammonia is to be released, it will be released in large amount of water because it is highly toxic. Okay, it is highly toxic. So the land animals or the terrestrial animals will not be basically releasing the ammonia. So the terrestrial animals will not be releasing the ammonia. So who will release? Who are the organisms or the animals which are surrounded by large amount of water? So where this ammonia will be released, the organisms which are surrounded by large amount of water will be releasing the ammonia, and hence they are called as ammonotelic. Examples over here. Examples: amoeba, sponges, hydra, starfish, etc. Okay. Now, so we can say that excreted product is mainly ammonia, and these ammonia molecules are basically so soluble in water. They are so soluble in water, and hence they can easily diffuses out through the body surfaces, particularly of the animals. So they will easily diffuse out through the body surface of the animal. Okay, and they will getting diffuses inside the body, and again it will be removed from the epithelial cells. It will be removed from the epithelial cells in the form of NH4 also. Okay, so ammonotelic. I hope things are clear. So ammonotelic is the where the excretion is in the form of ammonia. Next is the ureothelic. So here the excretory product is mainly urea. It is mainly urea. As we have seen, urea, it is much more diluted. Okay, so we can say urea can be tolerated in much more concentrated form because it is around 1 lakh times less toxic than the ammonia. Why? Because it's basically diluted and it's less toxic. So ureothelic are the one which will be releasing which has got excreted product as the urea. So urea can be tolerated in much more concentrated form because it is around 1 lakh times less toxic than the ammonia. However, we have to make sure, we have to understand that entire amount of urea produced is not excreted. So all the urea which is present or produced in the body is not excreted, but a part is retained in kidney also. So not all the urea will be excreted out. A part of this urea which is formed inside the body will be retained by kidney, and which is involved in osmoregulation. So this urea which is retained by the kidney is basically involved in osmoregulation. We know what is it. Example, where it is found mainly, these are found in the cartilaginous fishes and amphibians and the mammals. So you have to note it down. Okay, ureothelic. Next is uricotelic. The name itself suggests the organism animals will be excretory product will be uric acid. Is uric acid. Now we can say uric acid is again so very insoluble in water. Okay, so this uric acid can be passed out almost in the form of precipitate. Okay, because it is almost insoluble in water. So as it is so insoluble in water, it will be removed out in the form of precipitate. Okay, and because of this the water will be not lost in high amount. So here it is responsible for preventing the water loss. Write it down. So uricotelic organisms are the one where the uric acid is released in the form of particular precipitate, and hence the water will not be lost. Where it is mainly found, it is mainly found in the land vertebrates which are laying shelled eggs. These are mainly found in the land vertebrates which are laying the shelled eggs. Okay, so that is about the different type of animals on the basis of the type of nitrogen wastes which are there releasing outside the body, that is ammonotelic, uricotelic and uricotelic. I hope things are done. Next, let us see different type of excretory organs inside animals, different type of excretory organs in different organisms. So here you can just find it out. In the case of protozoa, it's a plasma lemma, or we can say general body surfaces. So the membrane of the outer membrane or the external most membrane of the protozoans, particularly the paramecium amoeba, will be transferring or will be diffusing the nitrogen wastes outside the body through the surface. Okay, so we can say that surface called as plasma lemma. That's called as plasma lemma or the general body surfaces, right? Next, the organisms of porifera and cnidaria. The organisms of porifera and cnidaria like sponges and all that. Okay, so in the case of the very low organisms, simple organisms, it will be also plasma membrane of its cell. So each and every cell will be having its own membrane, and that will be responsible for releasing out the excretory waste. Next one is platyhelminthes like liver fluke, tapeworm and all that. So they will be having a primitive structure of nephron, which is called as protonephridia. So they will be having a primitive excretory structure which is called as protonephridia, or the same can be called as flame cells. So in that, note down what are the flame cells. These are the excretory units. It is asked many times. Okay, so what are flame cells? Flame cells are excretory units of the platyhelminthes like planaria, liver fluke and the tapeworms. So they will be having flame cells which is also called as protonephridia. Next is Aschelminthes, roundworms. They will be having H-shaped rentate cells. They are called as rentate cells. They will be having H-shaped rentate cells. Next is the nephridia, which is found in these are the specifically excretory structures. These are the specifically excretory structure developed for the same, mainly found in the annelids like earthworm, nereis and the leech. Okay, so these are the nephridia. Next is the arthropoda. Arthropoda will be consisting insects mainly. Will be having the Malpighian tubules. Will be having this Malpighian tubules. We have done the same Malpighian tubules in the structural organization of animals, right? Then crustaceans like prawns will be having the antennae or green glands. The green glands has to be kept in mind. So these are the type of excretory structure mainly found in the crustaceans. And scorpions and spiders will be having coxal glands. Okay, so you should be knowing this. It may be asked. It may get asked. Okay, so what are the arthropodas having the excretory structure? Like the insects like the centipedes and the millipedes will be having Malpighian tubules. The insects like the crustaceans like prawn will be having the antennae or we can say green glands, while the one having the presence of scorpions or spiders are called as coxal gland. Okay, next is the mollusk. Mollusk will be having a specific organs, or we can say organs of Bogenus, or we can say Cabers organs. So these are the specific name to that excretory structure which are found in the different type of organisms. So here not some specific cells but a specific structure of cells will be found, that is called as Cabers organs, or we can say carbon organs of Bogenus. Next is Echinodermata like starfish. No specialized excretory organ is found yet. Okay, so we are not very much sure. Hemichordata like the Balanoglossus. So here they are having a specific gland called as proboscis gland. It's again important. Sometime it may be asked. So in the case of Echinodermata, Hemichordata, we have got specific structure called as proboscis gland. Okay, next is eukaryotes. We have got neural gland. Make it sure neural gland is, although its name is basically neural gland, but it will be responsible for the excretion also, excretion particularly. Next is cephalochordates. Cephalochordates has got specific structure called as solenocytes. Okay, and the vertebrates consist of mammals particularly. Okay, so mammals and all those organisms, avians and all that. So here they will be having a pair of kidney. You have to note it down, a pair of kidney. So this is present in the most complex animals. In the case of most complex animals, we will be getting the pair of kidney. Okay, now we have seen the different structures of the different type of animals for the carrying out excretion. Now in the case of human beings, which are again mammals, will be having kidneys. Now let us see, there are different animals which are having different type of kidneys. So these kidneys are also of different types on the basis of their structure, shape and particular functions. Mainly functions are the same, like the filtration of the blood and removal of the waste. Okay, but they are of different types depending on the evolutionary history as well. How are they formed? Okay, now let us see, first is the archinephric kidney. So it is also called as ancestral kidney. It's archi means old, okay, old, and nephric is something related to the kidney. So it's a type of old kidney, or you can say very old kidney, right? So it's called as ancestral kidney. What is it? Ancestral kidney. Such a kidney is found in the larvae of certain cyclostomes like myxeme. Okay, they are mainly found in the larvae of certain, but do not occur in any adult vertebrates. So they are not normally found in the vertebrates. They are normally not found in the vertebrates. Okay, and glomeruli, we will see what it is. Glomeruli, we will see the structure of kidney. We will discuss what the glomeruli is. So glomeruli are only present in some of the posterior tubules. So they will be having tubes which will be having very few of this part of this tubules will be basically consisting the glomeruli. Okay, and this glomeruli will be external without capsule. You can note it down. In the case of archinephric, the glomerulus, or we can say glomeruli, glomeruli, will be having no capsule. So this is something important. Next, and this is also called as ancestral kidney, mainly found in larval stage. Okay, next is the pronephric kidney. So here the nephrostomes are present. Write down. In the case of pronephric kidney, nephrostomes are present. You can say nephrostomes are present, which will be also called as ciliated in nature. We can say ciliated funnel-like structure. Write down. So these are having nephrostomes are present in the case of pronephric kidney, which will be ciliated and forming a funnel-like structure. Okay, they are mainly found in the organisms like tadpole of frog, and it is also called as anterior kidney. So first one is ancestral, and pronephric is called as anterior kidney. Okay, next is mesonephric kidney. On the basis of the type, we can say mesonephric kidney when it has got a Bowman's capsule. Is present in uriniferous tubule. When the Bowman's capsule is present in uriniferous tubule, it is called as mesonephric kidney. Mainly found in fish and frog. Write down. Mainly found in fish and frog. Last one is metanephric kidney. This is the most advanced kidney. Write down. This is the most advanced kidney. So what are metanephric kidney? These are the most advanced kidney in which the loop of Henle is present. Write down. It's the most advanced kidney where the loop of Henle is a specific tubular structure forming a loop responsible for the absorption and reabsorption. So we will see that. We'll see the structure in the kidney structure. Okay. So these are the most advanced kidney, that is metanephric, which will form a loop of Henle, and these are mainly present in the birds, reptiles and mammals. They are mainly present in the birds, reptiles and mammals. Okay. So that was about the types of kidney. Next is the urea synthesis. As we know that in the case of human, the release of the nitrogen waste will be in the form of urea, because it is so so less toxic than compared to the ammonia, around 1 lakh times less toxic. Okay, so let us see. And this, all of the urea will not be removed out of the body. Half of the a part of the urea will be retained inside the body for the osmoregulation. Okay, so let us see how this urea is formed. And this cycle of formation of urea synthesis, write down, this urea synthesis also called as ornithine cycle. Write down, it is also called as ornithine cycle. So this ornithine cycle is a biochemical aspect of excretion. Write down. So what is this? This urea synthesis or this ornithine cycle. Ornithine, O-R-N-I-T-H-I-N-E. Ornithine cycle is a biochemical aspect of the excretion. When we will study this about the kidney structure and all that, that's a physiological aspect. That's a physiological aspect, right? Aspect. But when we basically see how this urea, which is the nitrogen base, is formed, then we can say it's a biochemical aspect of the excretion. Now this ornithine cycle or urea synthesis is also called as Krebs-Henseleit cycle. Write down. Krebs, K-R-E-B, Krebs-Henseleit, H-E-N-S-E-L-E-I-T, Henseleit. So we can say Krebs-Henseleit cycle or ornithine cycle or urea synthesis. Where does it occur? Mainly it occurs in liver. Write down. So liver is playing a very important role. Okay, it's not only about the kidney and all that. So liver, where does it occur? It occurs mainly in the liver. It occurs in the liver, which includes mainly 5 different steps. So here you can see this whole cyclic pathway. Let us discuss each of them one by one. So in the first step, what is happening? The ammonia is formed. So in the first step, the ammonia and the carbon dioxide will be reacting. This ammonia and carbon dioxide will be reacting to form carbamyl phosphate. Now this carbamyl phosphate is basically formed in the presence of an enzyme called as carbamyl phosphate synthesis. It's called as synthetase. Carbamyl phosphate synthetase. Write it down. So first enzyme which is taking part in this biochemical pathway is the carbamyl phosphate synthetase. What is it doing? It is reacting basically NH3 ammonia and the carbon dioxide, which is utilizing a ATP, which is also utilizing 2 ATPs, which the 2 ammonia molecules. So we can say it will be responsible for taking 2 ATPs. So 2 ammonia plus 1 CO2 will be forming carbamyl phosphate. That's clear. Now the second step. In second step, the carbamyl phosphate combines with ornithine to form citrulline. Okay, now here one more substrate will be getting in reaction, that is the ornithine. That is called as ornithine. So this carbamyl phosphate will be reacting with ornithine to form a structure, to form a molecule called as citrulline. Now this reaction is also basically carried out with the help of an enzyme, and this enzyme is ornithine carbamyl transferase. Okay, so we have seen 2 reactions. First was a carbamyl phosphate synthetase. Second is catalyzed by an enzyme, that is ornithine carbamyl transferase. During this also, one inorganic phosphate will be removed. So here no ATPs are utilized. ATPs are not utilized over here. Instead, one organic phosphate will be removed from the carbamyl phosphate. So out of this carbamyl phosphate, what will happen? This phosphate will be removed. Now the formed molecule is a citrulline. Now the citrulline will undergo the third reaction. Where this citrulline joins to the aspartic acid. This citrulline which is produced over here will be joining with this aspartic acid. Here we can see. Okay, so it will join through this aspartic acid and changes to arginosuccinic acid. So here the citrulline plus aspartic acid is both combined together to form a molecule called as arginosuccinic acid. The molecule called as arginosuccinic acid. Okay, its molecule is called as arginosuccinic acid, and in the presence of enzyme called as arginosuccinic synthetase. This enzyme which is present is called as arginosuccinic synthetase. Arginosuccinic synthetase. So we have seen 3 enzymes. The next to the last is the 4th step. The 4th step will be basically converting this arginosuccinic acid into 2 substances. It will be converting into 2 substances, that is the arginine and
fumaric acid, arginine and fumaric acid. Okay, out of which this fumaric acid will be removed out of the cycle. It will be removed out of the cycle and it will be utilized for different purposes as a substrate. And in the presence of this reaction will be taking place in the presence of enzyme arginosuccinase. Okay, now here we can see the fumaric acid is released and the arginine is released. Now the same argine will be getting converted into ornithine. The same argine will be getting converted into ornithine. How? By removal of urea. By taking the H2O and it will remove the urea in the presence of enzyme arginase. So with the help of enzyme arginase, arginine is hydrolyzed. We can say hydrolyzed. What does it mean? It means it will be broken down with the help of water. So with the help of enzyme arginase, this arginine is hydrolyzed to urea and ornithine, which is when this thus the regenerated, again the ornithine is regenerated and this ornithine will again go for the same cycle, है ना, citrulline cycle. So that ornithine cycle. Okay, so this was about the ornithine cycle, or we can say Krebs-Henseleit cycle, or we can say urea synthesis. So what we have seen, it's basically consisting of 5 steps. First step, the reaction between ammonia and the CO2 in the presence of enzyme carbamyl phosphatase, giving out the formation of citrulline. The citrulline will be now responsible for reacting with this ammonia and carbon dioxide will form carbamyl phosphate, and this carbamyl phosphate plus ornithine will be responsible for formation of citrulline. This carbamyl phosphate plus ornithine will respond for formation of citrulline. The citrulline will now respond for formation of, when it moves, basically it goes along with the aspartic acid, will form arginosuccinic acid. Arginosuccinic acid will be getting converted into arginine and fumaric acid in the presence of enzyme arginosuccinase, and this arginine will be hydrolyzed with the help of H2 molecule to give urea, which will be removed out of the body, and ornithine. This ornithine will be taking part again in the chemical reaction and hence will be maintaining the continuity of this pathway. Hence it is called as ornithine cycle, where the cycle is continuously moving on. That was about this. Next, in the next topic, we will start with the human excretory system, where we will be discussing about the different organs associated with the human excretory system and the different processes which is taking place in the formation of urine and all that. Okay, so that was about this topic. So in the next lecture we will start with the human excretory system. Okay, that was about this. I hope you have understood. If you have got any doubt, you can ask.